For me, Obey is the team that's coming into Season 7 with a big chip on their shoulder. It feels like everybody on this roster has something to prove. There's WOWY, who I think played really well last year but was on a bad team. You have Inbowned, Bobby, who's coming from the Console League. He wants to shake off that Console League stigma. There's Wlfy, right, from that old rival roster with Deathwalker and Collis. He wants to prove that he was an elite player then and he could be right back to being an elite player here again. There's Weekend, who because of his stream and some of his other focuses, it feels like he's always having to prove that he is an SPL level jungler. And then there's Ducky, who gets all this, he's like one of those guys that all the pro players tells you is really a strong mechanical player, like a top player in his position, but you never get to actually see it on the battleground. He's got something to prove coming into this year. And despite all that, I still think that they're gonna end up being a bottom end team.
So WOWY's a guy that's been in the league for a little bit now, certainly not the rookie that he was a couple years ago. And he's starting to find his footing, in my mind. I think that in games where WOWY is able to stay safe and get to those late game team fighting stages, I think he is a very good late game team fight hunter a lot of the time. I think sometimes he struggles in poorer matchups and things of that nature, but overall, I think WOWY is a solid SPL hunter. I don't think he's going to be a star for this team necessarily. I don't think he's going to be the guy that, you know, we draft our whole composition around getting WOWY ahead and then we let him take us to the promised land. I just don't think that's his style, and that's not a bad thing. I think that you need your solid dudes who are just going to do their job, and I think that WOWY is very good at doing his job.
Inbound's a player for me that deserves the spot in the Pro League. Sure, he's got plenty to learn and may need to control some of his edges and fine-tune a few things, but I think he's put a lot of work in to deserve the shot to where he's at. Great and well-liked member of the Pro League and the pro community, so to speak, but that means he's going to be useful for a team like this, that he's going to want connective tissue to make them all come together. Now, his aggressive playstyle is fantastic, and he can play pretty well in those aggressive playstyles, maybe too much aggression sometimes. But sometimes there's definitely a lack of defensive gods. He kind of struggles a little bit on the defensive side, and I think that's something he may need to look to work on through this season. And some of that will come down to how the Pro League gets played in Season 7.
Man, there's so much to say about Wlfy coming back to the SPL because we heard so much. There were so many rumblings behind the scenes coming into Season 6, particularly around the mid lane. That was the shallowest position to me in Season 6 by far, where we lost a lot of talent from that position. And even still, Wlfy wasn't getting picked up. And it's so hard to know. You hear so many different stories about what the reason is. But none of that is going to matter if Wlfy comes into Season 7 and just plays. Like, if Wlfy comes into Season 7 and is right back at the same level that we saw him with Rival back when he was playing with the Deathwalker Collis team and Vode that we saw before, then I think all of that stuff goes away. And instead, we're just right back to, oh yeah, Wlfy's right back to being a high-end mid laner again. Can we get him back to Worlds again and see if we can finally get him that win that he was so close to before? But I think that he's one of those guys that has so much to prove this year. People are going to be following him around, watching just about everything he picks, every decision that he makes, his confirms on Fire Giants, all that stuff. There's going to be a lot around Wlfy's play. He's going to be under a microscope, but he's one of those guys that I think can thrive with that extra attention. He loves to be counted out. He loves to be the underdog and come in and prove you wrong.
It wouldn't be an SPL without Kurt, Week, and Trey in the jungle somewhere. Look, I know a lot of fans out there don't think that Weekend deserves a spot, yada, 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 yada. I don't buy any of that at all. I think that people forget how good Weekend was at the beginning of last year when Obey started really re-ramping and playing really well all of a sudden. It was often because Weekend was making big plays for them in that jungle. Weekend's a leader. This dude is the type of guy that you love to have on your team. I know the public persona can be a little bit grating at times, but trust me, this is a dude that you want in your corner at all times. I think Kurt's a really, really smart guy. Look, is he gonna be the world's best jungler this year? Probably not. But you don't need the world's best jungler to be a top tier contender. You need a guy who's gonna understand what his duty is, be there and be a good teammate for you, and do his job on the battlefield. And I think Weeknd is more than capable of doing all of that very, very well.
So Ducky, the solo laner from Obey, he played last year, and previously he was on Enix over in Europe alongside Funballer and the SK team that also didn't do so well either. I really like Ducky. I think Ducky has a lot of potential that hasn't really been shown through his career. I think a lot of that is self-confidence for Ducky, that he's not realized how good he actually is. But the more and more pros that he works with and plays around, I start to see that pros recognize it too, that he does have the ability in the solo lane. But some of it is down to confidence level, but also him speaking up for himself on where his strengths and weaknesses may be. I want to see more out of Ducky this year. I think this is the year he needs to shine and really show what his capabilities truly are, because the scene recognizes it. The fans not so much, but to get the fans on board and to get everybody starting to realize how good Ducky is, he's just going to start showing it.
So I've said all this positive stuff, I think, about how Obey can kind of change the narrative around them as a team and them individually as players, because they all are bringing in some baggage, I feel like, this year into the SPL. Now, they should still be very competitive in their games up against the higher end teams, but I have a feeling that more times than not, those are gonna break the way of the top 4 teams instead of Obey's way. Obviously, I'm super open to being proved wrong in that, and halfway through the season, we're all singing the praises of Wlfy, Weeknd as being this scary mid-jungle combination, but until I actually see it on the battleground right now, I'm expecting this to be one of the bottom end teams.
As being a roster or, team chemistry, there's tiny bits of team chemistry here, but there's a lot to work with this team of trying to get their individual skill to be shown, but in the correct way. The main goal for this team really will be how well they can synergize together. Now, if that synergy comes in at day one, that really shows that they're all on the same page and they're all working as a unit, this team can do well and move up the standings. But on an initial entry point, a lot of people's expectation for this team is probably going to be around 6th to 8th. And that's understandable considering where we've seen some of these players play previously.
I think that this is going to be an aggressive team. Just looking at the roster, I think that's the playstyle that fits them best, because that's Inbound's playstyle. I really think that where Inbound goes, this team is going to go. I expect growing pains at the start, but don't be surprised if this is the type of team that upsets the top seeds a little bit more frequently than you would expect, but then still struggles against teams that you feel like they should be beating. It's going to be a volatile roller coaster.